Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. Wizards of the Coast has officially announced Homelands Remastered is coming to MTG Arena. This is hot on the heels of, Shadows over Innistrad, and they are doubling down on this. It's going to be legal in Standard. It's going to have new play formats that we can do. But for this purpose, I'm going to do my top 10 list for the most impactful cards that I think will have the biggest change on the standard format. So let's get right into it. All right, first some honorable mentions to warm up before the top 10. So this is Singear Autocrat. For 4 mana, this creates 4 creatures on the battlefield. Now, obviously this is good in an Aristocrats deck, plus Singear Autocrat is kind of on theme for an Aristocrats deck. But I think there are other applications beyond that, right? If you get down a Singear Autocrat when there's a Jetmir on the field, that by itself is going to be 5 creatures. They're going to have +1 in Vigilance, 1 more creature than that, and they're going to have +2 in Trample. Whichever order that you play that in, it's going to be pretty good. So yeah, if you have enters the battlefield, gain life when creatures come in, or the opponent loses life when your creatures die, or sacrifice engines that you want. This is just kind of a generally interesting card. Up next, we've got the classic Acen's Shade. So this Shade Knight is just straight up a 5/5 with protection from white. So back in the day, this used to be good enough. This probably is not good enough anymore, although abilities like protection from white that make a creature very hard to target or block or deal with in combat, they've gotten very scarce in recent Magic sets. And there are a number of decks in Standard that would have trouble dealing with this creature. The thing is, by the time you reach 6 mana, you should be winning the game anyway. You could be playing, an enchantment that starts copying spells out of your graveyard, or you could get a 5/5 Angel that makes a 1/1 Citizen that draws you a card and has a shield counter on it. This is the kind of stuff you can do for 6 mana. This is a 5/5, and some decks would find it very problematic, but I think probably the time of Acen, both, figuratively and literally, has passed. Next honorable mention, this is Acen Crusader. So it used to say the number of heroes you control, right? Its power and toughness are 2 plus the number of heroes. That's been errated to say soldiers and warriors. Now, this creature is not a soldier itself, which is a little bit of a problem. But I think in our standard format, there will be at least some people who experiment in their soldiers deck with going down 1 or 2 copies of Myrel and trying out 1 or 2 copies of Acen Crusader. Because, you can just imagine in a soldier deck, the turn you play this, it's going to be, what, a 6/6, a 7/7? It's going to be enormous. So if your soldier deck would rather go tall rather than wide, then I think this is an interesting thing that you could at least try out in the deck. It might not end up getting there. All right, one more honorable mention here. Leeches. Admit it, you thought that Leeches was going to be in my top 10. Admit it, you thought, since it removes poison counters, the only card in the game that does, that was going to make the top 10. But no, there's actually more impactful cards than this. So, yes, it removes poison counters. It deals damage to you equal to that number of poison counters. So, That will be fine, probably, if you're up against the green-blue poison deck. But if you're up against the green-white poison deck that's applying combat pressure to you, then Leeches might kill you anyway when you cast it. I think it's a fine sideboard card, um, for best of three or whatever. But I don't think it's really that good. It's okay. It's an interesting option to have for sure, but I don't think it makes the top 10. All right, one more honorable mention, then we're into the actual top 10. So this is Broken Visage. Most of the time, this is going to be kind of a bad removal spell. Once in a while, you will completely blow out the opponent by 2-for-1ing them in spectacular fashion. It kind of requires them to be attacking you with two things to really get the full value out of this. If you've got a good use for sacrificing the creature token, then you might get some extra value out of this card anyway. It can only destroy a non-artifact attacking creature, which is, those are some big limitations. But the shadow token, the spirit token that it puts into play, could 2-for-1 the opponent either by blocking another attacker or by eating up an instant speed removal spell if the opponent doesn't want that to happen, to kill a token that was going to die at the end of turn anyway. There's even an interesting use case where you could take a spell like Defabricate or Urtai and counter the trigger that happens at the end of turn step in order to keep the token. I don't think that's going to happen most of the time. I don't think most people will try to make that happen, but it's interesting. All right, number 10, Spectral Bears. So a 3/3 for 2 is a big stop sign, right? If you're going up against an aggro deck. So, a red deck has to spend 2 mana, probably, to burn this out, unless they've already, gotten down Mechanized Warfare. Or if you're up against soldiers, you're going to be pretty happy to be playing a 3/3 on turn 2. And if you're against black, Spectral Bears pairs up pretty nicely against Graveyard Trespasser. Plus, you can go on the offensive pretty well if the opponent has a black permanent. Needs to be a non-token permanent. Otherwise, the bears can only attack every other turn, and then they don't untap. That's not the worst, though. They can attack at least some against anyone. And they're a heck of a defensive play on turn 2. If you want to stall the board and get some, attacking power down, you could do a lot worse than Spectral Bears. I think some people are going to give this a try. All right, number 9, Serrated Arrows. Now, I don't necessarily expect this to stomp all over Standard or anything, but we've got Proliferate in the format, and this card looks awfully good next to Proliferate. It's not a do-nothing play on turn 4. It can kill something with 1 toughness, or, help you win, get a trade in combat. And if you're proliferating the Serrated Arrows, you're simultaneously making your opponent's creatures weaker and, filling the arrowhead counters back up on this. For that reason, I think there's a chance there could be a deck that wants Serrated Arrows in it. Number 8, Costco Falls. So this one is a world enchantment. That means there can only be 1 world permanent on the battlefield between you and your opponent. So if they have a world enchantment, then this will destroy it. If they play a world enchantment, it will destroy this. So the real meat of this card is creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature. So this is a, propaganda ghostly prison style effect in black. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice this unless you can tap an untapped creature. You might be concerned about whether or not you can keep this on the board after a board wipe. But if you have, Wandering Emperor to play out at instant speed, or if you have something like Mirrex, right? Mirrex could make a creature at the end of the opponent's turn. You can also put a stop on your upkeep. So if they kill that token, you can, untap your lands, then make another token in response to this trigger on your upkeep. And there are very good odds that you can find a way to keep Costco Falls around. And this will greatly slow down the opponent's offensive against you. I think this is a card people are going to brew around. I have no idea if it's going to, change the format or not, but I think it's worth experimenting with. Number 7, Merchant Scroll. This is a 2-mana blue sorcery. You search your library for a blue instant, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So the value of Merchant Scroll depends on the value of the blue instants that exist in the format. Obviously, this could enable combo decks. It could also be used as a way to chain spells together. Right, if you're like a red-blue kind of spells deck, your creatures are getting larger as you cast spells. I think Merchant Scroll will find a home in Standard. I think some deck somewhere is going to have enough blue instants that it wants to fetch up. This card will see play. Number 6, Orcish Mine. It's been a long while since we had a decent 3-mana land destruction spell in Standard. First, land destruction crept up from 3 mana to 4, then it crept up from 4 to 5, and now it's almost not printed at all, which is really depriving red and green of part of their color pie and the answers that are available in those colors. Anyway, Orcish Mine doesn't destroy the land right away. It does deal 2 damage to the land's controller when it does destroy it. And there are ways to recur enchantments and auras in Standard. I feel pretty certain that people are going to experiment with Orcish Mine and try to find ways to get it back from the graveyard and keep replaying it over and over. Land destruction is definitely popular, not to play against, but for a number of people to play with. And I'm pretty confident that Orcish Mine is going to see Standard play. Number 5, Anzarin Ruins. So this is an effect that you don't see in red, but this is a 4-mana enchantment. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type don't untap during their controller's untap steps. The implications that this has on Standard are enormous, right? You could name soldiers, for example, or humans, or Phyrexians, or anything you could dream up, angels, vampires, whatever the opponent happens to have over across the table from you that's tapped. Just name it. It's a blanket effect. It's not just an aura, right? It affects all of their creatures that share that type. So it could lock down one thing, or it could lock down all of their things. This deck is going to dramatically impact Standard and the format that we know. There might be some decks that people decide are no longer viable just because of the existence of this card. Anzarin Ruins is going to completely upend Standard and a lot of older formats as well. Number 4, Primal Order. So this 4-mana green enchantment, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. And if you've seen Standard recently, you know that non-basic lands run rampant. Not so much with, mono black or mono red. There's also a mono white deck. But, the Grixis deck, or the Legends deck, or, Esper, there's just a lot of different decks that rely on a lot of non-basic lands. And this is a punishing play against those decks. It doesn't necessarily destroy those archetypes, but it's one heck of a sideboard tech to pull out against those decks. Number 3, Death Speakers. So this is a pretty unassuming looking little 1/1 human cleric for 1 white. Protection from black has a lot of big implications in the format, though. This totally shuts down early black aggression in the game. So all of the black aggro decks are going to have trouble with this. Black midrange is also going to have some trouble with Death Speakers. This can probably slot into some of the humans decks. I don't know for sure that this is going to be widely adopted as tech against mono black, but it's a card that they're going to have to respect, and it could completely change the face of the standard format if people start adopting this card. There's a lot of gold cards as well. The Grixis deck uses Blood Tithe Collector, whatever it is, and Corpse Appraiser, and all of those cards are black. And suddenly you've shut down all of their offense, and they're having trouble targeting this and dealing with it in any way. Could totally change, the format and the makeup of Standard. Number 2, Sea Sprite. So earlier I said that Spectral Bears was a big stop sign for aggro. Sea Sprite, my goodness. If you're in best of 1, mono red makes up such a big slice of the decks that you go up against and play. And then again, the Grixis decks, things like that, have a lot of red creatures in them. And then, various mid-range decks. The applications of what you can block with a Sea Sprite just kind of goes on and on and on. Mono red, as far as I know, doesn't have a good way to deal with this card. They could probably go wide and get around 1 copy of this if you don't have other good answers. But yeah, if you're taking control of the battlefield, doing things with the game, and you've got a Sea Sprite to block, or if you have 2 Sea Sprites, red deck's probably in trouble. I think the existence of this card is going to greatly change the face of Standard. It's not that impressive in Limited, but I think for the Standard metagame, Sea Sprite's gonna make a heck of a difference. Number 1, you guessed it, it's Memorylapse. This is an infuriatingly good blue counterspell. Kind of hearkening back to the power of blue counterspells in the days of yore. So it seems a little innocuous at first glance, putting a spell on top of its owner's library. But first of all, it is a 1-for-1 trade, right? All of your cards start in the library to begin with, so sending them back there is kind of the equivalent of sending them to another zone like Exile or the Graveyard. It's a card that's not in your hand, and it's not on the battlefield. But the setback you potentially hit of getting something sent to the top of your library over and over could sort of time walk you out of the game, right? If you're not making your land drops, if you're not drawing into other spells that you would rather be casting. There are game states where setting you back in this way and preventing you from seeing a new card in its place is worse than if it had gone to the graveyard. At 1 blue and 1 colorless, it's incredibly versatile. It's an incredibly powerful counterspell. Sees play in just about every format that it's legal in. And it's going to dramatically shake up Standard. So there you have it. That's my top 10 list for Homelands. I think that it's going to make an impact during its stay in Standard. And it's going to shake up the older formats too. It'd be interesting to see how everything susses out in the end. And if I've brought you some entertainment on this first day of April, then like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. And until next time, stay cool.